There's a reflex that human beings developed throughout their entire history that, within the context we live in today, has become the greatest obstacle to growth. It's the reflex to flee from pain. For millennia, this reflex was essential. It kept you alive, moved you away from danger, preserved your energy for when it was truly necessary. The problem is that the world has changed in a way the brain hasn't fully processed yet. The pain you feel today is rarely a signal of real danger. Almost always, it's a signal of growth. And the reflex to flee, which once protected you, now imprisons you because it doesn't distinguish between the pain that destroys and the pain that builds. It runs from both at the same speed. And so you learn over the years to create distance between yourself and anything that causes discomfort. You develop a sophisticated repertoire of avoidance strategies, some obvious like procrastinating and distracting, others so subtle they don't even seem like avoidance, they seem like wisdom. You learn to call fear prudence, retreat balance, escape self-care. And with that refined vocabulary, you construct a life that hurts less and less and then delivers less and less too, because everything worth having in life is on the other side of some form of discomfort. And you've been systematically paving every detour to avoid crossing it. The flight from pain has a cost that only appears with time. In the short term, it works. You feel better, the discomfort passes, the threat disappears, but in the long term, every flight takes something. It takes self-confidence, because every time you retreat in the face of a challenge, you deposit evidence that you're not capable of facing it. It takes capacity because the muscle that isn't exercised atrophies, and the muscle of resilience, of tolerance for discomfort, of the ability to continue when it hurts is a muscle like any other. It takes meaning because a life built around avoiding pain is a narrow, predictable life without the texture that only risk and effort can create. And there's something even more subtle that fleeing pain takes, something that's rarely spoken about. It takes your relationship with yourself, because you know when you're running. Not always in a conscious and articulated way, but at some level, you know. You feel the difference between genuine rest and avoidance disguised as rest, between a necessary pause and a retreat that's afraid to admit its own name. And when you flee repeatedly without taking responsibility for it, without even recognizing what you're doing, you gradually build a distance between who you are and who you could be. And that distance, over time, becomes a kind of internal dishonesty. A conversation you never have with yourself about the choices you're actually making. The honesty that growth demands begins there, in the willingness to look at your patterns of escape without judgment, but with clarity. To identify where you consistently retreat, where discomfort appears, and you consistently create a reason not to cross it, where your life has the same repeated holes because you always detour at the same point. That look isn't punishment, it's diagnosis. You're not attacking yourself, you're knowing yourself, and the precise knowledge of where you flee is the map of where your growth is waiting, because the pain you run from doesn't disappear, it waits, it accumulates. And the longer you postpone the encounter with it, the more weight it gains. Not because it got bigger, but because the habit of fleeing got stronger. The same pain that would have been crossable 2 years ago, if you'd faced it head on, seems insurmountable today because you spent 2 years strengthening the muscle of flight instead of the muscle of crossing. What was an obstacle became a wall, and the wall, in most cases, isn't reality. It's the narrative that the habit of fleeing built around it. But narratives can be rewritten, and they're rewritten in the only way real narratives are rewritten. Not with positive thinking, not with affirmations, not with the decision to believe differently. They're rewritten with action, with the concrete experience of going toward what you avoided and discovering it was crossable. With the real data registered in the body that the pain that seemed insurmountable had a side beyond it. With the accumulated evidence that you're capable of more than your history of escapes suggested. And that evidence changes everything, because the confidence that comes from having crossed pain isn't fragile like the confidence that comes from words. It's structural. It's built on something that happened, on something you lived, on proof you yourself generated. And it doesn't disappear when someone questions you, when a result doesn't come out as expected, when the process gets harder than you planned. It stays because it was earned in the only place where real conquests are made, which is in the direct encounter with what hurts. There's a phenomenon that psychologists call anti-fragility, a concept developed by Nassim Taleb that describes systems that not only resist stress, but grow stronger because of it. The bone that fractures and heals becomes denser at the fracture point. The immune system that faces a pathogen becomes more prepared to face it again. And the human being who faces pain with intention, who goes toward discomfort, knowing what they're doing and why, becomes more capable, more resilient, more equipped for the next challenge than they were before the previous one. You don't merely survive pain, you feed on it. It becomes the material of which you're made. But all of this requires something that goes against the oldest reflex you have. It requires that you don't flee, that you remain present when it hurts, that you breathe inside the discomfort instead of escaping it, that you treat pain not as a signal that something is wrong, but as a signal that something is being built, and that the construction requires exactly this moment that you want to end as quickly as possible. I'm not talking about masochism. I'm not talking about ignoring legitimate pain, about pushing the body or mind beyond what's healthy, about confusing self-destruction with development. I'm talking about the pain of growth, the specific discomfort that appears when you're expanding your limits, when you're doing something you don't yet know how to do well, when you're in the process of becoming someone you aren't yet. This pain has a different quality when you learn to recognize it. It still hurts, but it hurts with purpose. And pain with purpose is one of the most transformative experiences that exists. Because on the other side of it isn't just the result you were seeking. There's a version of you that was forged in the process of seeking it. More capable, more confident, more whole. A version that knows by experience and not by theory that pain isn't the end, it's the means. That discomfort isn't the enemy of growth, it's the vehicle. And that every time you chose to stay when you wanted to flee, you were making the most important choice that exists. The choice not to let the oldest reflex in your brain decide the size of your life. Today's pain is tomorrow's strength, but only if you don't run from it. Stay, cross it, become strength.